Hi, and welcome to DevOpsCon Munich. I'm Chris Stewart, and I'm here with Julia Wester, the co-founder of 55 Degrees AB. Is that right?
Yep.
So, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to get started, if that's okay.
Sure.
So you gave a talk yesterday, Transformation Day, about the dark side of work.
Yes.
And how exploring that can actually make teams stronger and better. So I wanted to ask, can diving into conflict and dissent really have tangible benefits?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing to remember, though, is that we have to, not all dissent or conflict is created equal. So we do have to make sure that it is conflict and dissent that's meant to be constructive and build up the group to get positive outcomes, not to tear it down and be subversive. That doesn't help anyone anytime. But yes, if we have dissenting opinions, then it forces us to think more deeply about the position that we hold. And so when we're challenged, we might have to do more research, we might have to consider additional options, and all of that really just serves to strengthen what we're trying to do. It helps us create more robust and more resilient solutions. And no matter what happens to your original position, you win if that's what you're focused on, the thing that you're trying to create. Because either I'm going to find a better opinion, a better viewpoint, and move forward with that, or I'm going to feel even more confident about the opinion that I held and in the path that we choose to go forward, because it persisted even beyond the dissent. So yeah, I think having dissent as a deliberate practice in your workplace can really actually tangibly improve your outcomes.
Wow, okay, thank you. And you're also going to be talking about the drawbacks of binary thinking and why spectrum thinking is actually better to prioritize progress over right and wrong. And why do we need to step away from this way of thinking?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I'm just inundated all the time, especially, I mean, you're originally from Britain, right? And you've got the whole Brexit thing going on. I'm from America. We've got the whole Trump thing going on. And our worlds are just completely mired in binary argumentative thinking. It's like we've collectively lost our minds a little bit and we forgot what we're trying to achieve. So we have people that were elected to serve the people, to bring the country forward and to help us grow as a society. But along the way, they've lost their way, and this adversarial relationship that's supposed to help bring that dissent and help us see good options in between the two extreme viewpoints, that's turned into more of an enemy type of relationship, and we've devolved into name calling and focusing more on winning an argument rather than getting things done. So that can happen at our workplace as well. If you think about these philosophical arguments or even religious wars between methodologies or opinions about how much test coverage you should we have documentation or should working software be our only documentation? You know, all of those things, it's easy to fall into a strong opinion and not want to give an inch. We're wired to do that. It's really easy. But much related to the first subject of dissent, recognizing the value in another viewpoint helps us bridge the gap and work together to achieve our more common goals. And again, because we are listening to other viewpoints, you get those same benefits. You get a stronger outcome. So we can look at the benefits of each viewpoint, because each extreme viewpoint usually has something in it that's good. There are probably a few exceptions. If you know those, just let me know. But there's usually a little bit of good. And once we understand that there's a little good in each one, we no longer have a problem that has a single solution. So it's not a problem to solve anymore. It's a situation that we have to figure out how to manage to get a balance between two valid viewpoints. And just like looking at the positive side, we also have to look at what happens if we over-focus on one versus the other, like we originally wanted to do. I wanted my viewpoint to be the only thing that we thought about. And if there's positives in the other side, there's negatives in my side if I don't get that out. So it's all about recognizing the value and the danger in each viewpoint, and actually using it, leveraging that to make your life better. So we don't just discover, explore that for the sake of doing it. We do that so we can know when we're starting to go too far in one direction. And then techies will like this. You look for early warning signs or monitoring, right? We can set up monitoring for the early warning signs when we start to dip into the danger zone. And then we can have action items that we say, when these monitor alerts go off, we're going to do these things to get us back to the upside and get us back to balance. So there are some tangible, actionable things that we can do with a spectrum thinking mindset to help us achieve a better outcome for our organization. It might not be super easy to start, but in a way it almost makes, instead of, it's a little easier in a way than just trying to insert two people with dissenting opinions and make them play nicely together. Because if you're making everyone participate in this activity where you are forced to think about the positives and negatives of both extremes, they end up being their own dissenter, right? They're self-admitting that there's value in the alternate opinion. And so it's yet really another approach to bringing conflict and dissent to have more resilient solutions.
Wow, so that sounds like it has a lot of potential.
It does, yeah.
But that must be a really challenging shift. So are there any ways that we could use, or do you have any advice for us that we could make this transition smoother?
Yeah, actually, the situation or the framework that I just sort of talked through has a name. It's called polarity mapping. Okay. So the whole recognizing the positives and negatives of both extremes, early warning signs, action items, that is all a model called polarity mapping, helping you create a virtuous cycle towards your goal instead of a vicious cycle towards the thing that people feared that drove them to the binary in the first place. Okay. There are other things like liberating structures called wicked questions that help us look at these binaries and how to manage in between. But I think a good way to get started is to have someone that's outside of the problem space help facilitate a discussion until you are used to doing this enough that it no longer feels controversial. And that could be someone else within your team or within another team in your org. It doesn't have to be a consultant, although we like to get paid, but we also like companies to be self-sufficient. And then once you're even aware that this is a thing we have to be concerned about, you do start seeing it everywhere. So maybe even before you get into doing those things, just being aware is the first step. Once I started thinking about it, I started seeing these binaries everywhere, and thinking about what I might be holding a binary position on is a good first step. So building that awareness is good.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. And I've also seen elsewhere in your work that you talk a lot about a Swedish word. I hope I get it right. Yep. Logm.
Yeah, you said it perfectly.
Okay, great. So I've been practicing that. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how it fits into this spectrum thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So first I'll tell you how it fits in. So Logm is the place on the spectrum where you find the perfect balance for you. So Logm is a word that's really baked into the psyche of Swedish people. It doesn't directly translate to English. Most people try to translate it as the Goldilocks principle, not too much, not too little, just enough. But it's really better described as the place of contentment or a perfect equilibrium between extremes. So when I talk about the perfect equilibrium between extremes, right, that makes in my mind a picture of a spectrum with two poles, one on either end. Yeah. So it's when we do all of these exercises to explore that spectrum, really, Logm is the place where we're trying to get people to. But first they have to identify it. And the interesting thing about Logm is that it's very contextual. And it's not necessarily a sharp point. It could be like a fuzzy zone that you can flux around in. You just want to have a threshold that when you move too far out of the way, you have that monitoring to bring you back in.
Okay.
But yeah, it's take working software as documentation over comprehensive documentation. So if you're exploring that spectrum to find out, should I be weighted more towards working software? Should I be weighted more towards actual documentation? A lot of that is contextual. If I'm a highly regulated industry, I might need to have more comprehensive docs than just a website. And so that person's Logm is different from the others. So it's a fun concept to use. I was completely terrified of using it in front of Swedes. But yeah.
Same reason I was scared of saying it in front of you. Okay, so just one last question then before I let you go. What is there to gain from integrating this philosophy into software development setups? I think you might have already answered that a little.
Yeah, we'll try to wrap it up though with a good thought. So I've talked about the benefits, having better outcomes, making better decisions that have considered more options. And that's a succinct way to say it. And then finding the places where we're not doing that. And we can look for these really, these dichotomies, these religious wars, the automate everything versus people who are reluctant to automate, or 100% test coverage, or, I guess some people want none, but looking at places where there's lots of arguing about who's right, and then finding out, is this worth the time and effort to do this? And if so, that's where we want to start implementing this, because you'll find out along the way that you get to a Logm level of automation. This is just right. Going farther doesn't bring you value. It hurts you in this area. So there are lots of individual places in our organizations where we can look at this as a spectrum and finding the just right place.
Okay, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us, and thank you very much for watching. Bye.